We are live. Hi, Lars. Welcome to Ventures Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me. Looking
Uh,
forward.
to, Amazing. To start the show, I would love for the to give like our amazing sponsor a quick shout out. This episode is brought to you by Verovent. If you're a GP or LP looking to simplify capital raising and deployment process, Verovent is here to help. Trusted by over 800 funds and managing more than $2 billion in transactions, Verovent offers a secure, streamlined payment platform designed specifically for private capital market. I'm sorry, I haven't read ads for like 2 minutes. I'm dying. By the way, Verovent is awesome. Just use it. Say goodbye to manual reconciliation and repeated follow-ups, and raise and deploy capital faster and with greater transparency. Ready to make your fund operation smoother? Visit verovent.com or actually use our link down below. See how easy it can be. Okay, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you have founded a company called AutoFarm back in 1998, and then you have been an investor in various different companies. Now you're managing director of Aspenwood Ventures. Before we dive into everything investing, maybe we could start with like what were some core early lessons in your career that kind of shape you into who you are today?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Interestingly, so maybe if I go one step further back, so at one point I was a national team athlete, and I had this weird. I'm Canadian, grew up in Canada, and we had this thing where we were sort of the best, regionally for what we did, maybe even the best in the country. But that we went to an event one time, and there was like this other team out of Texas where they finished first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and we finished sixth. And there's sort of a decision point in life where you're like, we're the best in our area. Like, that's great, but like, that's not okay. So how do we go and beat these people? So we actively left Canada and joined the team that had beaten us at that event with the goal of being sort of the best. And so that was, that was one of those decisions in life which sort of set me on a certain path. And I did grad school in the US with the exact same thinking, right? Like I could go to a great school here in Canada or there in Canada, or I could go to Stanford and try for, see what competing with the best look like. Mm-hmm. So that's what got me down. And then we did the company you mentioned, we were actually doing self-driving vehicles in the 90s. So I don't know, is that 25 years ahead of the market? Built a nice business there. We weren't doing cars, we were doing tractors and mining equipment. But still pretty cool. It was ahead of the DARPA challenge, which was the event that then set forth we were actually building self-driving vehicles when the DARPA challenge was going on. We probably should have competed, but anyway. Yeah, and then joined a firm called Hummer Windblad Venture Partners. I had been building in that business. I've been building hardware and software products, through the .com collapse and all that. And man, hardware is a hard business, very capital intensive, hard to raise when venture is in a low period. So I was like, I don't want anything to do with hardware anymore. And Hummer Windblad had started their life, or their one of the things they were very famous for was they were the first ever software focused venture capital firm. So back in 1989, they took this idea that, the venture capital had been around for a while, but it had been mostly actually in hardware. And then they saw this new software world, and Windblad had started and sold a software company. And they said, okay, let's put those two things together and do software venture capital. I mean, sounds crazy in today's day and age, but to give you an example of how hard or how crazy that was, it took them 3 years to raise their fund because people were like, I just don't think software is a thing. So I joined there to essentially jump 2 feet into software. Same deal, like go learn from the best and go join the best. And well, fast forward about 10 years later, I took over the firm and we have relaunched as Aspenwood Ventures, but we do the same thing, early stage software focused venture capital.
Maybe we could start with like, I guess like when you started like pivoting from software to hardware, I think like from my research, I know that obviously you guys invested in some of like the greatest like enterprise platform like Mulesoft, and but I wonder when you are thinking about like investing in the SaaS category, like how do you pick a specific subcategory to invest in? And then nowadays, like every investor is like an AI investor. So like I guess like what's your take on like coming from the hardware era? Like what are something that you find really interesting in the AI era? Maybe we could stop from there, and then like maybe we can, or maybe we could start with like, give the audience a little bit of background on Aspenwood Ventures. Maybe like, to talk about like the check size, the font size, as well as like the investing strategy, and then we can dive into other stuff.
Okay, so Aspenwood Ventures, we just raised our third fund. So it's we have two GPs, myself and Steve Kishi, both come out of the Hummer Windblad track. So we $75 million fund. We write. We're sort of an old school approach to venture capital. So we're a high commitment model. We write somewhere between 4 to 6 initial checks a year, so initial investment checks a year, and those checks could be anywhere from 1 to 5 million. And so we're often involved in the first round of financing for these companies. The names have changed from pre-seed to seed to Series A. But that's the check size. So typically, our companies are literally 2 founders, a dog, and an idea, just getting started, just forming the company. We're the first money into the company, as we were with Mulesoft, and as we were most recently with a company called Sonora, which is some Mulesoft alum who are starting a company in the AI space. So I can tell that story a little bit. So we'll do it from that very raw 2 founders just getting started to maybe early product, maybe early customer, could have $500,000, $1 million in revenue, that kind of thing. And that's the sort of span of where we invest. We're a high commitment investment firm, so we're looking for reasonable ownership and a board seat, and sort of we're assuming we're partnering with the founders for. I mean, Mulesoft was like a 12-year journey. We're assuming we're in for, we're going to be together for a long time, and going through the ups and downs of making a startup successful together.
For sure. I wonder, okay, so LinkedIn used to say, I haven't seen you, Lars, since like Extreme Startups. Are you taking DEX currently? Yeah.
That was a comment from LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's a comment from LinkedIn. I'm not sure who this is, but hi. I just want to say hi to you. Yeah.
We are actively investing. We just closed a new investment. So yes, we're taking decks, we're taking meetings. That's what we do, for sure. If that was the question, I didn't get a chance to read it.
So I wonder, maybe we could start with like, what in the current AI era. So like in my research, one part about it is like, I think you guys are also a patent expert. Am I correct?
I mean, that's how we approach life, how we approach investing, how we approach companies is so there's a pattern. I mean, part of venture capital is this sort of pattern matching. So seeing.
I don't think it's pattern matching. I thought it was a patent. I think you're a patent expert, or am I correct?
Well, I have some patents. I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a patent expert. No. Look, in the previous life, we filed patents on all sorts of things related to self-driving vehicles, related to using GPS in interesting ways. My master's work was in the GPS field. That was I don't claim too much of that technical prowess anymore. At one point, I'm in the Space Technology Hall of Fame. I don't hang that one up either, but yeah.
I wonder, so like maybe we could start with like, back in time, since you had experience in hardware. So like I feel like nowadays like deep tech is making a comeback. How do you think about I guess like investing in lately I just like yesterday I just put another tiny check into a so YC company, but I feel like there's a huge trend of people building software around like like deep tech or infrastructure, or just like in general I guess like user testing or like hardware testing space. I wonder, coming from the hard tech era, like what are something that you feel like are interesting to invest in, and then what are something that you would never touch?
Yeah, and actually the place where we were doing self-driving vehicles was, I guess, now called ag tech, right? Agriculture technology. That is also having a resurgence in the current era. There's all sorts of new companies building up around there. Now I spent better part of a decade building a business in that category, and I have both positive and negative thoughts on what it takes to do that. Maybe to answer your question a little bit differently, the whole part of pattern recognition that I was sort of mentioning is this, there's sort of a repeating themes in history, right? And the whole core investing model that we believe in is that it's a little bit of the Clayton Christensen disruptive model, meaning you go through these phases where, the nice thing about enterprise software is it sort of that market gets 10, 12% bigger every year. So it's a nice rising tide market, right? Oh, but where Hummer Winblad and Aspenwood have had success in the past, and this is sort of we're talking 40 plus years of sort of software investing data, before my time and then with my time. In addition to that growth, there's these times where you get sort of a Precambrian explosion of a new platform. So something comes along. Back in the early Hummer Winblad days, this was mainframes to client server technology stacks. And when you do that, the entire software stack gets to get rebuilt and reimagined and so on. And we had the same thing with on-premise software going to software as a service. That transition took, it had different names for a little while, but we sort of almost now know that as on-premise to cloud. And I think AI technology stacks are doing the same thing. You get a chance to kind of reimagine not just the application layer, but the infrastructure layer, the monitoring layer, the security layer, all up and down that piece. And so when I think about whether it's deep tech, whether it's AI, whether it's ag tech, all those things, the real question is not whether there's a market there or whether it's an interesting technology. It's really a question of, are you going to see one of these like discontinuous jumps in the market? Like, you can build interesting companies that just kind of like in a market that's growing slowly, you grow faster than everyone else, and that's great. That's certainly one thing, but it's way easier when you go into a market where then it has this big discontinuity. And, to borrow a line from Warren Buffett, if you're in those kind of markets, like a ham sandwich could run these companies, because you change from a market push to a market pull scenario where everybody needs this, everybody wants this, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of our whole investing model is looking for and trying to understand if what people are doing are, going to lead into or create or be a part of one of these disruptive cycles in the software industry.
For sure. I just like at my own conference, the president of Cisco was there, and then he said that if there's no market pool, your product is never right. So, well, this is my recap, but I guess I don't think that was the exact words. I was doing a fireside chat with him, and then I feel like market pool is definitely extremely important. I wonder when it comes to market pool right now, since I feel like AI is obviously one of the hottest sector, but I feel like AI is probably the internet of back then. But why is internet was not that popular? Since you mentioned you have to convince people for 3 years to give you money to invest in software companies versus hardware. What was the challenge back then? Is there any equivalent of in today's era? Do you think AI is the new software, or what is something that people are missing?
No, I think it's almost undeniable at this point that venture capital startups and customers are acting very much like AI is sort of it's a new platform era. People are now building applications around sort of AI native stacks. So I think we are there, and we're currently in this sort of rising hype cycle of where what can't AI do? It can do everything. And I mean, in the 99 2000 era, everything was going to be internet, right? That was that was if you were in a business that wasn't internet enabled, you either got there fast or you got obsolete. And I think startups are feeling that pain today. You know, if you started a company 4 years ago in the pre-AI era, you know, you've got some hard choices to make to either become an AI company in a hurry, or be disrupted by an AI, you know, a person in your category. So those are very much the dynamics of this sort of, you know, big disruptive transformation in the market. I suspect we're going to have some ups and downs. You know, the hype will collapse a little bit, and much like in the internet, you know, there was a big wave of winners initially, and then sort of a slowed, and then you know, over time those you know, the Googles and people emerged, you know, sort of long term. I think the details of this cycle will be maybe a little harder to understand going in. Maybe they don't quite match exactly the internet phase, but I think it's a very disruptive thing. It's very real.
For sure. When it comes to like maybe like last question in the, I guess like in the general trend sector, then we can dive into some specific portfolio companies. One of them is like, since like we just talked about like you guys make 4 to 6 investment per year, and that like and then how do you think about like portfolio construction? That is like seems like a very high concentration model. Like it's basically 12 to like 18 companies per fund, I guess. Like, so assuming you guys also do some sort of like follow on, and then how do you think about like doing the high concentration approach in the very early stage? Just because I think it's very like I think the average was like 26 or like 26 to 32 is like the average venture fund in the early stage like portfolio construction. So like most people are doing more deals or even like double the size of the portfolio companies. How do you think about doing a high concentration approach? And when you find the founders, are they like primarily repeat founders, or like is there like a pattern that you look for to actually make up for this like very high concentration approach?
Okay, well, part of it is, I guess, we are following the exact same model that Hammer Windblad used in terms of portfolio construction.
Oh, maybe we could give a little bit like background on the other fund as well. I know Anne is
and Windblad, yep.
Yeah, Anne Windblad. She is on the Midas list like for many years.
Yep.
I tracked that since like 2017, and then she is like on for like various years. I'm pretty sure like the most recent year too, I think.
Anne is she's both a pioneer, one of the first women in venture capital, and she's a star. She has done fabulous things in her career and very good at helping the companies she works with. The Hammer Windblad fund group over the first 30 years of existence delivered a 41% net IRR using this high concentration approach. So you know, the debates go round and round on you know, market conditions, like can you even get the kind of ownership you want? Will companies let you have that ownership? And you know, there's so some people find it easier to write checks and get 5% ownership, but be in lots of companies. I have a heartfelt belief that, you know, you have to own a lot of your winners. And having seen the movie, having seen outcomes and so on, yes, we have a concentration risk issue, but yes, we have high ownership in the ones that win. And so I believe that's a strategy for delivering the best returns for our investors. You know, I don't know the data you're quoting. I don't know. I mean, there are people who invest at our stage who write 200 checks in a fund or something, you know, so I don't know. I don't consider they're not really the same investing model as what we do. And so if you're averaging across all those, you know, the average companies will be higher. Yeah, have conviction, go deep, own a lot of the ones that win. I mean, but to give you an example, you know, if you own 15% of a business and it sells for $1 billion at our fund size, you 2x the fund. Like, you know, the returns can show up in relatively small numbers. And so I think you have to have, it's a balance of all those factors. How big is your fund? How concentrated are you? How much ownership you have? What's your batting average and what's your win ratio? And so we tune those dials to look and smell and feel like the return profile that did so well for Hummer Windblad over 30 plus years.
I wonder, maybe we could talk about like using some of the portfolio company as an example. So you are investor of Omniture. I don't know if I pronounced it right. And then it was sold to Adobe for like $1.8 billion. And like, or like there's like a lot of different other companies in software space, but maybe we could just like use one of the companies as an example of like how did you guys kind of like find the company to like doing the diligence to like eventually the company is like obviously quite successful. How do you maybe win the deal to like thinking about exit using any of like your favorite portfolio companies?
Yeah, I mean, I could choose a variety. Well, let's take Mulesoft as a more recent easy example. I mean, they were a company. So their arc, just to set the stage, is we funded them as a 2-person startup. They were just getting started. They had an open source project that was disrupting what was known as the SIIA space, service oriented automation. So the idea is like it's kind of an integration data platform, and that business was a $20 billion a year business that was built on sort of legacy IT stack. So we were looking at, well, you sort of look at that and you say, okay, there is a legacy big $20 billion market that is, we can point to it and be like, here's the companies that do that. But then you could say the tech is a decade plus old, and it's creaky and it's not modernized, it's not moving with the times. And so probably the biggest bet we made at the time, well, it was a 2-person startup, so that's a pretty big bet. It's hard to imagine, but back then the biggest debate was about, can you build an open source business model? Open source is free, like what and of course now we've had some successes in open source and so on, so that would be an easier bet to make today, and we still make that bet today, but we made the investment with those guys in large part because they had a lot of people downloading and using their open source stuff for free, and they had some people raising their hands to use the product and wanted support, wanted to be paid, including a big bank on Wall Street. And the big bank on Wall Street handed them a 200-page document on vendor onboarding, that included like, what is your 24-hour support number? And the founders are like, your cell phone or my cell phone? Like, whose cell phone number are we going to give them? Like they weren't a company. And so we funded them to become a company, with the idea that their technology stack and the open source model would disrupt and take over this sort of $20 billion category. So new tech, new approach into an existing category that we knew the spend existed. That would be harder to make the bet on, for instance, new tech, new approach, but into a $0 market that you're hoping arrives.
Wait, but I have so many questions there. So like for the budget, when you mentioned like there's like budget towards it. So obviously I think like there is budget towards like nowadays, like maybe like let's call it like agent testing before launching something online. So like I think there's like a new stats from MIT report. I mean, I'm like, oh, don't quote me on this. I just heard about this recently, but let's say like I think it's like 95% of AI agent doesn't really like make it to the launch or something. So like it's like
so this might be now that you're framing it this way, I could say that might be the difference between where AI is today and where a Mulesoft investment was. In the AI's case, you can't necessarily point to like $20 billion of existing spend, that AI is going to disrupt it. There's a little bit more of like it's just going to replace all your software. It might, but it's not like customers have this problem. They currently use this solution. We're going to bring in a better solution and take over that problem. I don't think the AI story currently is quite as clean as that. Maybe on the individual category, like I'm going to go disrupt customer service.
Mhm.
I'm going to do an AI version of ServiceNow or something, so, okay,
Yeah.
that's a big spend in that category. We're going to bring an AI thing in to go after that category. You might be able to frame it that way.
Yeah.
But
Um,
yeah.
I have so many questions there. So like you mentioned, like basically you guys identified there's like a big budget. So obviously, like I think the point that you just made is like AI is like very new. So like how do you know if that's like the spending is actually gonna go to your thing versus like, the previous software, but adding some sort of AI layer within their own product. So I think that's such a very real thing. So like yeah, I feel like right now, like so basically lately I've heard the pitch. I was like talking to some YC company because the demo day is coming up. And then like some of the founders were doing like a lot of things that are like we're AI native. This is like an AI native problem. Like so how do we identify if people are actually gonna pay for that? And then also repetitively paying for that, just because I think when I chat with people, people's like general reactions like it is an AI native problem. Like right now, all these big tech companies are like looking for a solution for that. So that's why we're building for it. And then we come from these like company X, Y, and Z. But the problem is like, um, my curiosity is like, if the big tech companies are building for this, like how am I gonna like win if they're already building for this? And then the other problem is like, how do you kind of identify something that actually have like a longevity in the category? Like, so for example, the other day I was chatting with people building like chatbot agents. So like I think like the founder's argument was like our biggest clients are typically people who have built chatbot agents before. Then they realize there's so much challenges, so they decided to purchase our product because of that. Um, like since like I feel like you have invested in a lot more software than a lot of people. So like how do you think about like what is the software that's actually worth building or like people will actually pay for? How do you even like examine that if it's like AI native or like the problem's very new, like open source back then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can give you a couple thoughts on that. One is, I mean, literally everything that comes across our desk today is framed as an AI company, which is appropriate because that that is the wave that people are trying to be a part of. The question we couple questions we ask in the process is a little bit of like, okay, first off, let's take out the AI piece of this story. Do we like the business? I'm trying to come up with what a good example would be. Like, what's a if you strip away the AI and you say, yeah, I'm selling. I don't want to disparage anyone's category, so I'm trying to come up with one. But there's a category, and you say, yeah, but I'm not interested in selling used books online. Let's use Amazon. Like the AI version of selling used textbooks online is it's still, end of the day, it's still selling used textbooks online. Is that a market you want to be in? And then you have to ask yourself the question is, does the AI version of that win? Because I think, these, as I said, like Mulesoft was like a 12-year journey. So you have to want to be in the market that you're going after. And if you don't find that market interesting, just because it's an AI disruptor in that market doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be there. We do try to hold, like, one of the questions we ask internally after we talk to people is sort of like, yes, but is this AI native? Like, is this an AI unlock, or is it just sort of an AI layer on top of something? And a lot of our questions then talk about like, okay, let's talk about your tech stack. Let's talk about how you're building this. Let's talk about how you're approaching this problem. Because in some, we just find in some cases people are actually a fairly traditional software stack with just almost a UI layer that is sort of AI enabled. And I guess our belief is that's, if this is the next era, that's probably not enough. That's probably not, you're not leveraging that enough. And so there in the AI world, there's infrastructure, right? The open AIs and people of that world. That world in the venture space is controlled by a handful of companies and a handful of venture firms. Like, those bets are being made. I mean, what's the woman who just raised a $2 billion seed? I mean, my entire
thinking time machine.
my entire fund is 10% of her first financing. So like, that's just not a place where we
thinking machine labs. Oh God.
Yeah.
Thinking machine labs.
And then there's the application tier, which a lot of what we're talking about is sort of application tier kind of solutions. And so, I do think Sam Altman did, he did pose a question, which we still talk about, resonated really well with us, which is a little bit like, if what you are building is because AI, it has a hole in it or is not capable of, and therefore you see a problem you can solve by adding and improving the AI, so that it addresses this problem, that probably won't stand the test of time. Meaning AI as a corpus will get more and more powerful over time. So if what you're doing is augmenting a future path that's going to be essentially in the development path of an OpenAI or other, you will have an advantage for 2 or 3 years while your flavor addition piece to the AI enables your market. But then you may get to a point where, generic AI just does that without any extra work, in which case you now no longer have any sort of competitive advantage in there. So trying to think through and understand, where the development path of the sort of core AI infrastructure is I think an important activity for investors and founders to be a part of. Now, of course, the counter to that is, OpenAI bought a hardware company for what, $6 billion. So it's not even clear that you can know where the development path is, in this era.
Since you just mentioned that you recently just invested in a deal, like I'm sure it's somewhat of an AI company. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing something like that, or like, maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about the company itself, or like maybe if you could talk about like what it does and how did you kind of fund it to evaluate it. By the way, shout out to Ben, Carrie, and Mike for like coming.
Yeah. So this is a company that, well, to give you the background, we our limited partners at Aspenwood are a lot of successful high net worth people in the enterprise software space. So we have founders of Zendesk and founders of Mulesoft and founders of Five9 and senior execs at Salesforce and DocuSign and sort of go down that path. So that's a lot of who we raise capital from. It's almost like an investing club, if you will, with, we have a nice core of people who know who we are, who know what our market, they've lived in our space, they've built companies, and they're excited about staying involved and seeing the next wave of companies, maybe investing personally or being advisors or board members like that. That's part of kind of the magic of what we do at Aspenwood. It's a pretty vibrant group. They're actually pretty active. Just to give you an example, we have a company that is called WonderGraph. That's an open source GraphQL related federated GraphQL company that was introduced to us by one of our actually European LPs. We funded the company, and then we have a Canadian LP who had built open source companies in a very similar space and successfully exited them. So we have a company that was introduced to us by one LP, who then later on another LP who has specific expertise ended up investing in the company and is joining as an advisor, probably a board member. That's the level of kind of when you join the the Aspenwood portfolio. That's the kind of resources you get to pull on.
Oh, I have a question on the LP resources. So like this may be like, because I feel like a lot of funds have like a lot of LPs like that are, high net worth individual. Obviously the ones that you mentioned are amazing. But like how do you guys like kind of like stand the LP to like help with the portfolio company? So for example, if obviously I think the high concentration helps because like you don't have the help for like 40 companies. How do you kind of like badge I guess like, oh my god, what is going on? Sorry, someone's calling. I try to turn on everything, but okay, so I guess like when you were thinking about, let's say for when let's say like one of your portfolio company need an LP help from let's say the CEO of Zendesk, how, like, I guess, like, do you just call them and be like, hey, like like, basically, here's like what our portfolio need, or like, do you do like one-on-one matches, or like do you do like badge? So for example, I would think if I were like, a part of your team, I would be like, hey, here's like our like monthly update of like 6 portfolio companies, and then like if you could help with X, Y, and Z, will be very helpful. But I guess, like, how do you think about the relationship building with the portfolio founder and as well as the LPs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that is constantly evolving. To be honest, part of it is also you don't want to overload any particular LP with
Like too many things.
too many things, or things of not of consequence,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because does everybody want to talk to Freddie from Okta? Sure, but
Yeah.
like, if he has a couple interactions where people go, hey, can you tell me how to run sales? He's like, I could, but like, that's not my superpower, right? Like, tell me when you're already scaling enterprise and I can come in and make an actual difference, like that. Those are the kind of things. So making sure. So the answer is we do it in a variety of ways. We hope we're thoughtful about it. One of which is, we make announcements to our group. We write up a report on, hey, we just made this investment. Here's what they're doing. Here's the things they're doing. Please let us know if this is of interest to you. Like, we just sort of open that up, and then we'll do. They're probably not quarterly, but a couple times a year we do dinners where we bring the companies in and have them present. Thinking back to the last one, we had a dinner, and so what do we have? 35 people in the room or something that could make it, and I told the companies, hey, think about like 10 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of questions. And, we're going to have dinner and chat. You can meet all the people otherwise. And I was so wildly wrong. Like, people got up to talk for 10 minutes. And next thing you know, the first guy, I'm like, hey, people have been asking you questions for like an hour. We gotta move on because we got 3 to do, so that ended up being like 3 hours of interactive questions. Hey, what was the line? As a recovering CMO, or so, someone was like, I have the questions about what you're doing and so on. And that led, that's a double opt-in kind of night where people can sort of say, hey, I'm interested in this. Can you tell me more? Can I connect you to my, my former CMO or whatever? And then there's the last, which is like a fairly tactical, like you use the Zendesk example, like, we're building a company that's somehow related to the CRM space, and we need to talk to somebody who knows exactly XYZ in the CRM, or we need to talk to the guy who leads your enterprise thing. That can be a very targeted, request. This is what we're looking for. This company needs this, or, can you help us? So, it takes all those forms, but I hope that's one of the pieces of, that's why people will want to work with Aspenwood, right? That we can enable that.
I have a lot of questions there. So like, how do you track these like conversations? So sometimes like I feel like I made an introduction to like XYZ person, and then like you don't really know where things are going with them, and like unless like they like continuously like, update to you, or like either it's like a really big like collaboration, or like if it's like something like, I guess, like sometimes like how do you track these like introduction that you made? And then like yesterday I also saw my friend like tweet about like how much like intro call that she made to these like portfolio companies, let's call it like hundreds. Like, how do you even track the result? Just because I feel like I'd rather be the investor who make, like, obviously I think like numbers is like very, very important, right? Like numbers, like you never really know, but like, I think I'd rather make like 2 calls, but like that result into like the company closing like $5 million instead of like 75 calls to be like introduce them to like 70 like different opportunities, but like it leads to nowhere. I guess, like, how do you think about the intro that you make? And then, but like, I think if you're making a really heavy intro to someone, like it's probably like, it's like a big ask for that person, right? Like, so like, it's typically like, hey, can you like unlock a very critical like client or like punters or something, like, and like these really heavy ask, like you can't ask like the CEO of Zendex like 5 times a year, right? So like, how do you think about like evaluate like what is like a good ask? And then obviously I think like the dinner format, like let's call it like 35 people sitting at dinner, that's like a lot more soft than like, people can ask themselves than like, you make an introduction to so and so via email, and then that's like a big ask. You have to own them a favor and yada yada yada. How do you kind of navigate these kind of relationships to help portfolio companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think very, that's the question and the evolution, and part of it, I do think the concentrated approach that we've talked about helps with this a little bit.
Mhm.
And then just trying to make sure that the things you do ask of people are both consequential,
Mhm.
double opt-in, right?
Mhm.
Like, hey, I'm going to make this. Are you okay with this intro? This is kind of what they're going to ask. This is what they want to talk about, and make sure that
Mhm.
they're okay. I feel like I also have a belief that both people in that conversation are high functioning, high quality people.
Mhm.
So I feel like if I can make the connection,
Mhm.
let me give you another example. I also feel the same way about asking other portfolio companies to, like, so if you have a portfolio company that can help in the tech stack of another portfolio company, I try very hard to be like, here's a solution, you can talk to them. They may want to sell it to you, but you're under sort of no obligation to buy, because I don't want you buying because Lars told you to go buy that product, because I don't want that other company to have a customer who really actually didn't go through the decision-making ROI, because then that customer is a high churn risk.
Mhm.
And so in much the same way, if we can curate a conversation that's around an important topic, part of it is like, I just assume these people are high functioning people, and they will either find that it's, that the fit works,
Mhm.
and the person has a problem and this person can help
Mhm.
find it. And if it's not, that's okay. Like,
Mhm.
as long as they had a heartfelt conversation and
Mhm.
tried to find that solution, I
Mhm.
don't want to force a fit.
For sure. Um,
The nice thing about our LPs that over and over again that I feel, and I'm always surprised by, like, these are busy people, successful people. Their desire to be active and involved in new companies,
mhm.
that is something that people are motivated by, and
Mhm.
the level of which they give to our portfolio companies,
Mhm.
amazing.
Mhm.
And so it's something I super try, and by the way, like, our LP group probably represents a pretty good percentage of the inbound deal flow that
Mhm.
we actually end up funding, because the
Mhm.
LP introduction flow into us tends to be very high quality.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a question. So like for the LP intro flow, like do they just like, hey, if let's say call it um like the founder of Mulesoft, right? Like let's say like they receive a company, do they immediately forward it to you, or like do they do you have to like actively asking, hey, lately, like is there anything come to your desk, or how do you navigate these kind of like relationships?
Well, they're
I'm
all,
always curious. I feel like
yeah, they're all different people, so they act in different ways. It's not a uniform thing. My belief is that we need to be in sort of relative constant contact and communication with folks. Like, if you're not on someone's radar, they're just not, if they see a company, they may or may
yeah,
not
they
forward it.
forgot about it. Yeah.
So that's on us to get. We do a big ski trip, and we do all sorts of stuff to
Mhm.
keep that, those
Yeah, it's
relationships.
called Aspenwood Venture for a reason.
Yeah,
The ski trips.
and so, well, in our most recent investment, he was the CMO, Chief Strategy Officer of Mulesoft. So
Mhm.
he's just in touch with a lot of the Mulesoft alum.
Mhm.
And I think what happened was someone had reached out to him, as an advisor or as an early investor, and his
Mhm.
first thought was, "Hey, Lars, you should probably look at this too. I mean, we love and trust this guy, you
Mhm.
know." And he kind of gave it the, I don't want to tell you whether I like what he's doing or not, but I tell you I like the guy,
Mhm.
you know. And so that's how that introduction got made. I'm trying to think back through some other. We have one guy who he literally told, like, very successful, sold a company for a lot of money, and he's like, look, I'm not an investor type. I'm investing in Aspenwood Ventures so that I can, my answer to anyone who comes to me to ask me to write an angel check is to just say, please meet Lars, and that's been a great relationship. And he just literally, something comes in, he fires it to me, and he's like, hey, let me know if you're going to do this. I might write a check alongside you if you do. Like that's that's sort of he's simplifying his life by having me look at the opportunities that come through. That's a pretty unique one. Yeah.
I wonder, so like since like you guys already you already built a fund and now it's like rebranded to Aspenwood Ventures, I wonder, how do you think about like the LP relationship from like the past fund? Do they just like automatically migrate into this, or like do you have to like do like a second round of convincing on like, hey, we're building this new fund, yada yada yada? Like, how do you kind of like think about the LP side?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're sort of 3 funds past that now.
Of course.
That's a complicated era. We were making some changes. I mean, Helmer and Windblad, Anne and John were sort of, they were moving on. They were still supportive of what we were doing, but there was a change in there was a notable change in GP and all that. So that required a lot of discussion and chat and, hey, what's Lars and Steve's track record relative, so that we had to get through that hurdle. That was sort of one unique period of time. What I find now is we have a nice stable LP base. Given the individuals, though, there is a certain amount of each time we raise a fund, despite good performance and people wanting to be back, like some people, they change jobs, they retire, all sorts, there's so I feel like at least for our fund size and what we do, it's every time you approach a fundraise, you have to assume no one's coming back, and you gotta make sure you're building those bridges and bring them back. And we've been blessed that for the most part people come back. So
I guess like when you were thinking about, I guess like the prediction of the fund performance, okay, we'll cut like this will be my last question about the fund, and then we'll like go back to the portfolio company or trends. One thing is like, how do you predict like your fund performance? Like, like when people are like, I guess like, do you just say like, I guess like the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and the mid case scenario? But I feel like those are all predictions. Like, I mean, obviously the best case scenario is like we invest in Uber and then we're good. So, but how do you kind of like communicate that to like potential LPs?
Well, I mean, invested Uber at what stage? But yeah, so I think it's a great question, and it's certainly one that gets discussed. I would say that's not typically where our LPs are not asking us to make spreadsheets of low, mid, high case type sort of approach to investing. And I think in large part that's because you sort of say, oh, you're doing the same kind of investing that you did when you had a Mulesoft. If you have a Mulesoft, this will be a swing from the
fine, yeah.
And the reality is, because we really only do what I lovingly call the boring side of software, so non-consumer software, there is some predictability on base performance, right? Like if you can get into a company, get them from 0 to 1 million revenue, 1 million to 10 million, like you're going to make money on that company, like that, the founders.
I have a question on this. So how do you predict, let's say you invest in like 12 to 18 companies per fund, and then do you predict like, one company will be like in the $1 billion range that will return half of our fund, and then like the second company will be in, I guess like, I think I did the math of like, if you are running a $10 million fund, you have 40 portfolio company, like one of them have to hit like $4 or $5 billion valuation, and then 2 of them have to hit like $1 billion plus valuation, and then the rest is like, you imagine, let's call it like half of them die, and then like the rest are like 1x, 2x, or like just like below 10, like below, like let's call it 5x or something. So how do you think about made up of this?
this goes back to your concentration question from earlier too. It depends on how much you own of those winners, right?
Right.
So that does impact, what like if you have 40 companies and you only own 5%, then that 5% to return your whole fund has to be a much, much bigger win, right? So look, we're going to get some wrong. We're going to have some companies not work out. Venture is risky. That's part of it. The middling piece, I would say we do pretty well at batting average, because enterprise software at some level has some kind of predictability. If you can get it to reasonable revenue, you can sell the company for a low multiple, 5 times revenue or something, like you're going to get 1, 2, 3 times your money back on kind of decent companies, and if you can sell it for 10x, like that'll be a nice return. Look, venture is still dominated by power law returns. So you want to own a lot of 1 or 2 companies. That's sort of how I view it. If you take 15, 18 companies, you're kind of looking for 1 or 2 that are going to be nonlinear returners. And if you have 1 or 2 that are nonlinear returners at our ownership, at our fund size, you can have a 10x fund. The flip side of that is, if you just do a good job and go out and sell, like we can sell companies for 100, 150 million and return 3-4 times our fund reliably. I think your question might be more about which companies do you double down on than which company you invest in, if that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How, I guess, like the other part is like, how do you decide like which company do you double down on? And like also like I think the dilution is like if you enter like a first check and then when you exit, it's like half of it's like diluted already if you don't like keep adding follow-ons. But when you add follow-ons, like the valuation is like also like not like the initial. So like I guess like how do you think about like to invest more or not after the first one?
I mean, we still own 14% of Mulesoft at the IPO.
Wow.
I think we had started in the high teens, so we were not diluted. We reinvested at points when the 2 questions on reinvesting are: do you like the performance of the company and the potential of the company, right? That's the company side. And then do you like the pricing and ownership of it, right? So as an example, if one of our companies is successful and we invested at make up a number, a $20 million post, right? We have our ownership, whatever. If that company is doing really well, 2-3xing year over year, capital efficient, great. We might be totally excited if they're raising at $100 million valuation to write a check. But if someone gives them $1 billion valuation, you're like, well, that just doesn't, that's way ahead of what, and so then we have to weigh both those things as to whether I'm trying to use extreme examples, but you kind of have that, and then the fog of uncertainty in some, like Mulesoft, fabulous company. If what we wrote in our initial investment memo is the exact same thing they did in, when you got to their IPO memo. But that was a company that there was a time when that company almost got sold for, a reasonable outcome, 100, 200 million sort of piece. And it didn't happen, and everyone was sort of disappointed that it didn't happen, and the company had to retrench and rebuild. And so, where you reinvest along that path to the ultimate vision is almost easier to say in hindsight than it is to say, in the moment when you don't have perfect data and you don't know what's coming next in the company. So I'm a little cautious about being too prescriptive on these things.
I wonder, so like what is the AI era of Mulesoft? Like from like finding the 2 people, like since you mentioned like when you encounter them that they like didn't even incorporate the company or like not much has happened yet. So like were they like second time founders or like maybe exec at like a top company?
The Mulesoft guys?
Yeah.
They were first time found. Ross had started the open source project, which had been very successful. So we had some, we did, there was sort of, we knew he had the ability to build stuff. We knew it, that customers, people in the world liked it. We knew it was successful. It was being downloaded. But he had lived in, as many of our founders do, they have, in order to, different than consumer, I think, if you're in the enterprise world, you almost have to have lived in the kind of existing enterprise domain to then have the vision to disrupt that domain. So that tends to mean that the founders they may not be multiple time founders, successful founders, maybe they've started a company and now they're starting another company. That's certainly one path. But the more common path is, I've been inside the bowels of this company. I built a solution to try and solve this problem for us. And now I'm building a solution that can solve that same problem for everybody. But that usually means you have, I don't know, 5-10 years of domain experience understanding the problem. You may have even tried to solve the problem in different ways, and now you're coming out with a better solution. And Ross from Mulesoft's thing was very much that. He had tried to use all the legacy solutions, and his idea was, well, none of that's really, we need a new approach. And so the open source project got built to be that new approach, right? That's a fairly common narrative for us to get excited about and fun behind.
I want to be mindful of the time.
Classic kind of, in the big data era and all that, right? Like a lot of these people who founded the next companies in that era were people who had lived and gone through the sort of scaling of, let's call it, social media platforms, Facebook and so on, where the technology stack had to get completely reinvented from a traditional database and whatever to a NoSQL, high functioning, high throughput. We care more about throughput than we do about accuracy, and so there had to be people who lived in that era, understood that scaling problem and what have you. And then now they're coming out and saying, I'm going to take this tech to all these other people because enterprises are going to need this same kind of, scaling infrastructure, so on. Yeah.
For sure. I want to be mindful of the time, so maybe we'll wrap with quick 1-minute fire round for you.
Sure.
What's your favorite book?
That's a good. The one I'm reading right now is Peter Zeitlin. He's an economist. He talks about the large patterns in history about how civilization evolves and which civilizations win. That's my current read.
Wow. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I like to have at my dinner party? Can I do a current Tour de France rider? That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I'm going to go back to my high school friends. I was going to say my high school friend's father, who convinced me to go into engineering technical piece.
Valid.
I'll give a number 2 shakeout to that. I had a guy in college, so we're talking mid-90s, who had already been working in the Valley. And I think as a kid growing up in Canada, I'm not sure I would have known Silicon Valley was a place I needed to be if it wasn't for him.
Wow. Yeah. Where can we find you outside of work?
Say again?
Where can we find you outside of work?
On a bike.
Oh, bike. Love that. Well, Lars, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
I appreciate it, Grace. Thank you for the questions. I enjoyed it.
Okay, let me quickly end stream.